The Sikha today will be in Likud Sikhas Chelek Chafalev, the third Sikha to Parshas Vaera. The Rebbe starts with saying that the Kviyas Haftarah for Naseder is Minyan Parsha. It says in Torah and Shulchan Aruch and Al Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in different places that the Haftarah that we have on every Parsha is Minyan Parsha. That means it's from the same meaning, the same topic as the Parsha is. And as the Rebbe brings in order too, that's basically from Parshas Bereishis through Shivosar Batamus. And then the Rebbe says that another place in Kutasichas, the Rebbe wrote that even the Haftarahs from Shivosar Batamus and on also has a shaykhus of the Parsha. But mainly has other Parshas. But most of the Parshas, definitely, the Haftarah has a shaykhus to what the Inyan is in the Parsha. And he says this is all Al Pei Yidua, and based on what it's known, he says in order 3, the Avudraham, as betchila is Kriyas Haftarah in Staken geworden anstatt Kriyas Parsha. That the Chatchila, the Haftarah was made in place of reading the Parsha, which means that there was a gzeira from the Goyim that you're not allowed to read the Torah, so the Chachamim made that you should read the Haftarah instead of the Parsha because they weren't able to read the Parsha. But it obviously, therefore, since it's made that way, so from that we understand, it's verstandig, as the Haftarah darf sein in a Parsha. The Haftarah has to be from the Parsha because the Haftarah is in place of the Parsha originally. Later, it's not in the place of the Parsha, but it's still the Takona stayed, so it has to do with the Parsha. And that's why in order for the Rebbe says that you must have at least, generally, besides exceptional cases, generally has to have at least 21 psukim. Why does it have to be on 21 psukim? Because it has to be in place of the Parsha. The Parsha has 7 aliyahs. Besides Mafki doesn't count it separate. 7 aliyahs. Each aliyah must have at least 3 psukim, so it's 21 psukim. That's why the Haftarah has to have 21 psukim because it's inside of the Parsha. So from that we understand that the inyan of the Haftarah has to be the same inyan as we have it in the Parsha. The Haftarah from the Hantike Seder Vaera. So therefore, we have to understand how does it fit to the Haftarah of this week's Seder, which is Vaera. The Haftarah is Kelel Tzvei Inyonim Nevuis Nicheskel. Basically, the Haftarah includes 2 inyonim, which means 2 nevuos, 2 prophecies of Yecheskel. Prophecy number 1 was the nevuah al Parei Melech Mitzrayim val Mitzrayim Kula. He said a nevuah concerning Parei, the king of Mitzrayim, and on Mitzrayim generally. What was the nevuah about? The nevuah was that Eibush is going to destroy Mitzrayim. These is afilo nogdem v'vishafti yeshvus Mitzrayim v'zizayin hamamloch hashvola. So much so that even when the Eibush will bring them back, the Mitzrayim who were exiled, they will bring back, it will still remain in Mamloch HaShvola, means a very low country, a low government. Under them, and the Nevuah says that through Hashem doing this, V'yedu kol yeshvei Mitzrayim, ki ani Hashem, that all those who live in Mitzrayim will know that I am Hashem. That's one Nevuah that's in the Haftarah. Number 2, the second Nevuah is the Nevuah wegen Nebuchadnezzar Melech Boba, the Nevuah concerning Nebuchadnezzar, or it's called Nebuchadnezzar, it's Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bovel. There's a nevuah about him. What's a nevuah? As the Farba said, it Leich given Tzeir. Because he conquered the city of Tzeir, that him the Rebishter gave him schar pula. The Rebishter will give him the reward for what he did. That's the Lashon of Rashi. As Eretz Mitzrayim, he'll give him that he will be able to conquer Nebuchadnezzar. Melech Bovel will be able to conquer Mitzrayim, V'nosa Hameina, and he will take a lot of captives from Mitzrayim, etc., etc. So that's another nevuah. It's not glatig, so it's not simple. The first nevuah is the same meaning of the parsha. In Parsha Vaera, wegen the Makkes was the Rebbe gebracht of Mitzrayim. Parshas Vaera talks about the Makkes, the plagues that Hashem brought on Mitzrayim. It was durch them v'yed Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem. So through this, Mitzrayim will know that I am Hashem. That fits to the parsha. That fits the Haftarah. The Haftarah also says that it's about Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim will be destroyed, and the pasuk says that because of that, all Yeshua Mitzrayim will know that Ani Hashem. It's exactly like the parsha. Parsha is Hashem will punish Mitzrayim, and through that Mitzrayim will know that Ani Hashem. So the first part of the Haftarah, the first nevuah, fits to the parsha. Aber die zweite nevuah ist doch Teichnam wird geben Schar zu Nebuchadnezzar parlecha sein Sur. But the second nevuah doesn't fit. Because what is the second nevuah? It has to do with Nebuchadnezzar. The Eibush is going to help Nebuchadnezzar, help him, that make him conquer Tzur. So that's a reward that he will get. So what does that got to do with the parsha? And Afal Pi as ein Schare given Kanal was mir hat ihm gegeben Eretz Mitzrayim. Even though the Schare is that he'll be given Mitzrayim, what's going to be his reward? He'll get Mitzrayim, so L'chura does fit. That's, so to speak, part of the destruction of Mitzrayim. The destruction of Mitzrayim fits to the Parsha. So L'chura, this is also part of it. Since when Mitzrayim will be destroyed, who will destroy it? Who will get it? Nebuchadnezzar. So when it talks about Nebuchadnezzar, it seems to fit. So, but still the Rebbe says, that's not a praton aninya tofel. It's not the important part. The main part of the second nevuah is that he will get a reward. Happens to be that a reward will be that he will get Mitzrayim, but that's not an ikir in the second part. But the second thing, nochmer, even more, the sin with Mitzrayim b'yod is not minyan parsha. The fact that he will get Mitzrayim is not part of the parsha, not having to do with the inyan of the parsha. For him in the parsha, in the parsha doesn't talk about Mitzrayim being given to somebody else. It talks about the destruction of Mitzrayim. But this part that Mitzrayim will be given to Nebuchadnezzar doesn't fit. That part of the Haftarah doesn't fit to the Parsha. The Parsha doesn't talk about it. So what's the union of the second Nevuah? Why is that also part of the Haftarah? The beer in them, the explanation is like this. So in order 16, the Rebbe says there's a simple explanation. So the Rebbe, that the connection of what it says in the second part of the Haftarah to the downfall of Mitzrayim is simple. It says that Nebuchadnezzar is going to conquer Mitzrayim and get all the loot, which is dugmas when it's ultimate Mitzrayim, similar to what's going to be by Mitzrayim in the Parsha, that the Eden will take out all the goods, the Kesef Azor from Mitzrayim will empty Mitzrayim. So you could answer simple, that's the connection. But the Rebbe says, but what he's going to explain later gives it much more geschmack and connection to the whole thing here. What the connection of the second part that Nebuchadnezzar will get Mitzrayim, what's the connection between that and the Parsha? So the explanation is like this. The Birish Pnimi from Inyan HaParsha is, the deeper Pshatim, when we say the Haftarah is Me'inyan HaParsha, it's from the same Inyan HaParsha, means like this. Is nicht nur der Inyan HaMeduber in der Haftarah, der sein ähnlich zu Inyan HaMeduber in der Parsha. It doesn't mean just that what's written in the Haftarah, that Inyan, that subject that's written in the Haftarah is similar to the subject of the Parsha. It's more than that. But Be'iker, mainly what it means is, as the Teira Be'hero, was Mlafarus from the Haftarah, that the lesson that we have, the word Teira is from the word Hero, lesson. The lesson that we have to take out from the Haftarah, darf sein me'ein von der Teira Ve'ero, was wird herausgebracht in der Parsha, has to be similar to the lesson that we take out from what is written in the Parsha. So it's not only the story is subject of it, but the lesson has to be a similar lesson to what we take from the Parsha. Yes, Leimar, we could say the Rebbe says that jeder Parsha in Teira Melosh Nero and Halt doch Hayroe. Like we know that every Parsha in Teira and Melosh Nero contains a lesson. Is the Haftarah? What is the Haftarah? The Haftarah is taken from Nevi'im. Now, what's Nevi'im? The prophets. What is it? That the Inyonim of Torah get more explained, more in detail in the Nevi'im. So, b'meila, what it comes out that the Haftarah, which is Nevi'im, is the minyan parsha. We said it means the same lesson means that the Haftarah brings taruz the hero mer begilu beprotes. That the Haftarah brings out the lesson of the parsha more in detail, because the Haftarah is Nevi'im, and Nevi'im brings out more in detail what the parsha, what Torah wants to say. Since this is minyan parsha, means it brings out that a lesson even more. And in Order 18, the Rebbe says Mishnah, it says posting in Amos, Gila said David revealed his secrets to the Nevi'im. And the Gemara says in Tainis, there's nothing written in Ksuvim, which is part of Tanakh. That's not hinted in Chumash. And Rashi says, Chumash, you say Nevi'im and Ksuvim, the Chumash is the foundation of Nevi'im and Ksuvim. And then the Rebbe says in Order 19, based on what we said now, that this is just an explanation, a more detailed lesson from what the Torah is trying to tell us. That's what we have in the Haftarah. So based on that, you don't think this will give a more explanation, make it sweeter, so to speak, to understand. First, they made the Haftarah when there was a Gzeira that you shouldn't read the Torah. And they read the Haftarah, they made the Haftarah. Then when the Gzeira went off and you couldn't read the Torah, the takon of reading the Haftarah stayed. Why? Now that we're back to the Torah, that should go off. Now we understand why. The reason why the Haftarah came, really the deeper reason, is because the generations went lower. That people now, later generations, need more description, more details of what the Pasha is trying to tell us. So therefore, even though the Gzeira went off, but we still need this. The people still need more details in what the hero of the Torah is, so the Haftarah stays. So the bottom line is that what the Haftarah tells us is, this gives us deep, more general, a more detailed explanation in the lesson that we take from the Parsha. And that's the explanation in our case. Das, was zweite Nevuah is nicht geworden als Chelik von der Haftarah. The reason why the second Nevuah was said as part of the Haftarah is weil the Eroe from them, because the lesson we take from the second part was Nebuchadnezzar that Nebuchadnezzar got as a reward for conquering Tzur. He got Dafke to take Mitzrayim. So that lesson, as we will see, is nicht kein besondere Eroe for sich. It's not a separate lesson, but a prat und tetzor from the Eroe clothes from Poros Mitzrayim. It's a detail and a result of the general lesson of the downfall of Mitzrayim, which is written in the beginning of the Haftarah. The beginning of the Haftarah is written about the downfall of Mitzrayim, which is main from the Parsha. And there's a lesson in that. And that lesson is brought out even more when we see the second half, that Nebuchadnezzar, because of what he did, is getting the reward of conquering Mitzrayim. Now, what is it? So the Rebbe explains it. Parsha Vaera Parsha Shmeis. Parsha Vaera comes in continuation to the end of Shmeis. Was wird erzählt in the end of Parsha Shmeis, it says, wegen der Teine von Eden zu Moshe Vaaren, the Eden complaining to Moshe and Aaron, as durch them was they einen given by Belach Parem Melech Mitzrayim, that after, because the Moshe and Aaron came to Belach, to the king of Mitzrayim, to Pare, the Kush Hashiba geworden noch hergebe frier. The hardships of the labor became even harder. When Moshe the time he became the Mebish, and Moshe said this to Hashem. That them is the Mebish's entfer b'chilas Parsha Seina, and the Eibusher answered him on that complaint in the beginning of Parsha Vaera. He said, I heard the screaming of the Yidden, and I remembered the covenant I made. I will take him out, I will save them, I will redeem them, I will take him, and I'll bring him to Eretz Yisrael. That's the answer the Eibusher gave Moshe Rabbeinu's complaint. And then the 10 Makkos, the 10 plagues started, as it says in the continuing of the Parsha. The Churinit movement, that's not understood. The Azeh Verdof Arent for the time as Moshe Vaaren from the Fir to Hamatze from Heira Lamazeh. How does what the Eibusher said to Moshe an answer to the Tainer? The Tainer was that Moshe Vaaren made it worse. So what's the answer? Hashem says, I remembered Eden, I'm going to take him out. How does that an answer? The Shemaite is Nakas Ben Yisrael Gamer. The fact that Hashem, when Hashem said, I heard the screaming of the Eden, and therefore, the far Vesker is priest, therefore I remember the covenant, if it says, I'll take him out, etc. But he can't say free. That could have been before. He's asking, why did you make it harder? So he's answering, remember, I'll take him out. Well, why couldn't you do that earlier? Why is that an answer? Other Rebbe said, Gedar sein free. I don't think it could have been earlier. It should have been earlier. Likewise is given by Yishmael Kimis Nakosam Yisker Kimis Bris. As soon as Hashem heard their screaming and you remember the covenant, right away, should have taken them out. But Moshe is not given a medium. This is when Moshe was still a medium. The Bechal wouldn't have been hard labor. They could have done it before. I remember. Good. So what does it do? Why did it have to become harder in order for you to remember? Could have been right away. That proves that the real completion, when could it be that I remember and I will take you out completely? But it can't could only be after the Eden passed all the hardest hardship of the work, till it was very hard. That's the Eibusher answered him. He said, why did I make it harder? Because now I could remember you. In other words, if you wouldn't be so hard, I wouldn't be able to take you out. That's you asked the Kaishai. He didn't complain. The Moshe asked, why did you make it hard? That's why. In order for me to take you out, I had to be harder. Why? Einer von den Büren mit dem, one of the explanations is like this. The exile of Mitzrayim was a preparation, an introduction to the giving of the Torah. And the Rebbe explains why. Zwischen die Yonah, was Matan Torah tuvgeton is the roof from mitzvah malashim tzavse v'chibur. What Matan Torah, one of the things that Matan Torah accomplished is the concept of mitzvah. He gave us the mitzvahs. Mitzvah doesn't only mean commandment. Mitzvah also is from the word tzavse v'chibur, means connection. That means when we do a mitzvah, it's because that connects us to the Eibishter. That's what Matan Torah did. Kima mitzvahs, nor der far was this Rotzen Hashem. Now we're able to do mitzvahs just because this is what Hashem wants, the connection directly to Hashem. But the Chuis folgen the Eibishter Sivui by listening to Hashem's commandment, wer der Tzavse v'chibur von dem Odom ha'eise mit Kaviyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzav mitzvah. That makes the connection between the person who does with Kaviyachal, so to speak, with the Eibishter who commands us the mitzvahs. So that's what Matan Torah happened, that we could do the mitzvah directly because Hashem said. When das is neat, and this, the Rebbe says in order 27, the mitzvahs before Matan Torah were not like that. The Rebbe will explain that later in Sif Ches. Like before Matan Torah, it wasn't like that. Before Matan Torah, it didn't come just because the connection directly to the Eibishter. But Matan Torah, this is what happened. From now on, you could do the mitzvahs just because Hashem said. Und das ist nicht nur the mitzvahs in Sukkot von Chukim. And it's not only concerning those mitzvahs which are in the category of Chukim, that have no reason. We know there are three categories of Chukim, of mitzvahs, I mean. There's Chukim that have no reason whatsoever. Then you have Mishpatim, the other extreme, mitzvahs that have a reason, and without the Torah even we would do it anyway. And then you have in between mitzvahs, or Eidos, that we call them, mitzvahs that if Hashem wouldn't tell us, we wouldn't keep it. But after He told us, we understand why. So one might think that when we say that through Matan Torah became such a thing that you could do it just because Hashem said so, it's only chukim. So the Rebbe says no, not only by chukim that have no reason. We may when you talk in Norton as in them kima mitzvahs aus acharaymish sein Verstand und der Regesh sein eigener Mitzvah. So there for sure, there's no place that when you do the mitzvah, your own understanding, your own rationale should get mixed in, your own feeling could get mixed in, because there is no reason here, there is no feeling here. So that for sure you could do. You have to do because Hashem said so. But it's not only that, nor eich mishpatim. Even those mitzvahs which are called mishpatim. Was ilu lein emro yikadai leimram. If the Torah wouldn't say it, it would be on its own be understood to do it. So that also, through Matan Torah happened, you have to do it. Nicht weil der eigene Seichel sei mechayev, not because your rationale tells you to do it, nor weil azeo der Eibishter Geiser gegeben, because Eibishter decreed. So all mitzvahs you have to do just because Hashem said. That's concerning doing mitzvahs. Well, there is a limit of Torah, so too in learning Torah. Is moving the mukiv of nitfis and seichel odom, even though the contents of what the Torah is about and the logic of the Torah is understood, and its mukiv means it's surrounded, it's put into the seichel of the person, so the seichel of the person surrounds it. Nitfas means it's grasped into the seichel of the person. It's not, God forbid, human logic. It's Hashem's Teira, Chochmos is Borech. It's Hashem's wisdom, was his Hecher from Geder and Nivroim. It's higher than any concept of creatures, of creation. It says in Tanya, it started off by the Eibishter himself, beyond anything that has to do with creation, but it traveled down. It's kind of that even the logic, the rationale of a human being could be able to understand it. But Be'etzem, anytime you learn Torah, any word of Torah, even if it makes a lot of sense, it's the words of Hashem, which is beyond the human. But the far that's why before you start learning Torah, you have to make a bracha first. Why? Because the bracha represents the bittul to Neisna Torah. By saying you're thanking Hashem that He gave us His Torah. So that's the showing the bittul, the person nullifies himself to the one that gave the Torah. And in Torah 32, the Rebbe quotes the Bach. The Bach in Torah Rechaim Simon Mem Zayin goes into an arichas to explain what these brachas mean. That's giving yourself over that you're learning Torah because it's Hashem's chokhmah. So why do we have to have this bracha, which is the bittul? Well, dafke do the bittul only because when you nullify your own ego, kem der seichel anivrohom anemes etfis Torah, the seichel of a creature, of a creation, of a person who's created, could have a grasp on Torah v'zis chachmas shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as is this chokhmah of Hashem. Because as long as you're not bottled to Hashem, you're limited to your limitations, and your limitations are limited. You can't grasp the chokhmah of Hashem that's beyond limitations. But if you undress yourself of your own limitations, you mavatl your own yeshes, your own mitzias, your own self, then you could grasp the Torah of Hashem the way it is beyond the chokhmah lamata, beyond the teva of a person. And therefore, since this is what Hashem gave us by Matan Torah, He gave us, but we do mitzvahs, we connect directly to Hashem just because Hashem said so. When we learn Torah, it's connected just to Hashem because that's the rotzen of Hashem. Therefore, Eden should be ready Kabbalah Satira to sein Kelim of Tzenemen Teira Mitzvahs. They should be receptacles to be able to take. The word nemen take is in parentheses in quotations, means to take it the way you're supposed to take Teira Mitzvahs. The Yisurim from Golas Mitzrayim. We said before you have to first be bottled in order to get that. So in order to get the Matan Teira, they had to go through the suffering and the exile of Mitzrayim. This had to be very, very hard. But the Yisurim and Bayidin gepeled and Bittel Mazeir Metzias. This hardships caused by the Yidden to be bottled from their Metzias. We see it outright. Or somebody suffers, God forbid, that as if you become broken, you lose your ego and you lose your selfishness, so to speak. And their Bittel given the Keil to Matan Teira. And that Bittel became the vessel, the receptacle for Matan Teira. So this answers the question. Why did you make it so hard? Why couldn't you take him out before? The Abisha said, in order, the purpose of Mitzrayim is to break him real bottle, to come to Matan Teira. If they wouldn't be completely bottled, it wouldn't be very hard, wouldn't have accomplished, they wouldn't be Kalim to Matan Teira. So therefore, you're asking why I didn't take him out. I made it worse because I wanted it to be the worst, and when it's the worst, it's the greatest bittul, and when it's the greatest bittul, they're Kalim to Matan Teira. Now the Rebbe continues, just like we said as a preparation to Matan Teira, the Yidden had to be bottled to Hashem. That same concept of bittul had to be not only by the Yidden, it had to have happened to the world as a whole in order for Matan Teira to come down. That's the inyan of the plagues of Mitzrayim, the downfall of Paro, the king of Mitzrayim, who was not only the king of Mitzrayim, the Meshal Bekipa, he was the superpower. He was like the king of the whole world, from the ganze Welt, from the whole world. So he represents the whole world. And what had to happen before Matan Teira, there had to be a bittul in this clip of Parei, the clip of Mitzrayim, which represents the whole world. That would be a bittul for the clip. Klipas Parei is, what's the clip of Parei, which represents the whole world? This clip is Tekes Vayeshes. That's the strength of the person's own ego. As Parei himself said, Mi Hashem Asheresh Makela. When Moshe told Hashem, said, let my people go, he said, who's Hashem? Who's God that I should listen to him? We assert noch mehr ausgetouched in the Haftarah, and the Haftarah it says even more, Parei Melech Mitzrayim, Asher Omar Li Yerev Ani Asasini. Parei the king of Mitzrayim said, the river is mine, the river is the source of their livelihood that would overflow every year, and that source of their existence, I made it. I'm the God. So he denied in the existence of Hashem. Parei Melech Mitzrayim is the Menaget to Matan Teira. So automatically, Parei, the king of Mitzrayim, is the opposite. He's the opposing force of Matan Teira. Was ist verbunden mit Bittel now. We said before, Matan Teira is connected to the bittul of a person to Hashem. Parei represents the opposite of bittul. Then was Golos Mitzrayim Mitzrayim Matuvkit on the Minyan of bittul by Yidden. So through the fact that Golos Mitzrayim brought bittul by Yidden, is gekommen. So what came as a result? As that gebracht dem Apollo schwere from take Yeshes from build. So that brought that in the world should happen the same. That the Yeshes, the Mitzias, the ego of the world, should also be broken. Should also have a downfall. The bittul from Klipas Parei, the nullification of the Klip of Parei, Shalte, and his rulership, which is Meshal Bekipa, the rulership over the world. Yeshes, and also his Yeshes was broken during the Makis, through the plagues. We see that in the end of the Sedre, and the Parsha Vaera, as Parei made the Hashem Tzaddik v'Ni B'Amei, showing Parei admitted Hashem is the Tzaddik, the right one, and me and my nation are evil. So it brought him to Bittul, which represent the Bittul of the world, and that had to happen before Matan Teira. So the Rebbe says, so now we know what the Parsha is talking about. The Parsha is talking about the Bittul of Klip of Parei, the Makis Bittul of Klip of Parei, which is the preparation for Matan Teira, is the Bittul of the Yidden, and also the Bittul of the world of the Klip of Parei. Now, that Inyan as Klipas Parei Melech Mitzrayim, this Inyan that Klipa of Mitzrayim, which is through Parei, the king of Mitzrayim, is the Benagit to Matan Teira, is the opposition to Matan Teira, where Klera is gebracht in the Haftarah, which we said before, the Haftarah brings out the ideas of the Parsha even stronger, the lessons of the Parsha and the Parsha. So this idea that the Parsha tells us that there had to be the Bittul by Yidden and the Bittul Mitzrayim, that was the preparation to Matan Torah, is brought out more in the Haftarah. Ukenal, as we said before, the Haftarah is mer mefaret to mefaret. They're often the Seder. We said before, the Haftarah brings more detail and explanations in the lesson of what the Seder talks about. What do we see that from the Haftarah? If Mapolas Mitzrayim sein in the Haftarah mavur zwei timing. Why Mitzrayim had a downfall in the time when with the Haftarah, in the time of Yecheskel? The Haftarah tells us two reasons, and they're both one next to each other. In other words, they're not two separate reasons, they're connected. They're two separate reasons seemingly, but they're connected. What does it say? First it says, why will the downfall of Mitzrayim come? Because, that's the reason. Because they were a mishenes konel Beis Yisrael. What does that mean? Their father was Beis Yisrael, sich lost of the Zugis Dr. Hill from the Mitzrayim, since the Yidden relied on the promised help that the Mitzrayim gave, and they didn't keep their word. They promised the Yidden, you'll go fight and we'll help you. And they didn't come to help. For that, they deserve to be punished. That's one thing the Pasuk says. And then, gleich the Nocha, right after that, it says, is the Pasuk Mamshech, it continues. Lochein, therefore, Kayomar Hashem saying, in the Mayville of Cherev, I'm going to bring a sword and destroy Mitzrayim, when the Messiah, when he says, Yan, why will I do it? Because Omar Yair, Leib, and Yasisi. Because he said, the river is mine, I made it, or I made myself, whatever the pshat is. Adachur Mapolas Mitzrayim, Utzelib, Pare Zogn Yair, Leib, and Yasisi. That the reason why Pare had a downfall, because he said, the river is mine, and I made myself, I made the river, etc., etc. Here we have two reasons. They seem to be two separate reasons. One reason is because they didn't keep their word. Some of you, they should have done it. They didn't keep it. They deserve to be punished. Another one is because of Paris, Yeshes, Paris, Gaiva, Paris, thinking that he's a whole God, etc., etc. It seemed to be two separate Nyonim. Und doch bin sie der Novi, und in ein Smiches verhemschich. Genau. Nevertheless, the Novi ties them together, one right after the other. Der vom Verständigen an die zwei Avles von Mitzrayim ist eine Art von der zweite. So from that we understand that the two problems, two Avles, the two negative things of Mitzrayim that the Haftarah says are really connected to each other. The one is a result of the other. Kedel comment, as I will explain, the Rebbe says. Where do we see it? Mit kam upon him gered the Rebbe, I spoke many times, wegen dem, as ich mishpotim darf in Bekayim sein, weil der Rebbe ist der Geuser gewinnt. That even the mitzvahs called mishpotim, we have to keep, because that's what Hashem commanded us to do. That's what we have to do. Murum is bezeh, and that's hinted in this idea. What the fact that the 10 commandments, which is the source, the foundation of the whole Torah. So we find commandments there which are very simple. Don't murder, etc., etc. Why is it belong in Aseres Adibris? There we talk about lofty things, believing in God and all the philosophical things. Why would such simple things be part of Aseres Adibris? And the answer is, to teach us that even when we do the simple things which we would understand on our own. And he says in order 43, the Gemara says, in Erevan, if the Torah wouldn't be given, we would have learned out to be tzniizdik. We learn out that from a cat. The gezel not to steal from an amola, from a ant. We would learn out. So these are mitzvahs we understand themselves. It seems from that Gemara that if the Torah wouldn't be given, but now that the Torah is given, that's not where we learn it from. So where do we learn it from? We do it because Hashem said. That's why the Torah puts simple things. The Eibishter puts simple things in the most lofty place in the Aseres Adibris. So that's what how mishpotim have to be done, and as all as I said before, that even mishpotim, since it's after Matan Torah, you have to do those mitzvahs because that's a tzivui of Hashem, and that connects you to Hashem. So that's what we spoke about Matan Torah. This is what it says in the Haftarah. The Torah says, "Dosas Mitzrayim is geworden am Mishenes Chonel Beis Yisrael." This that Mitzrayim became a false leaning post for the Yidden. The opposite of their promise is V'siba the Reib given Zayin Yeshes, Zayin Zogn Yair Leib and Nisisi. It came from his Yeshes because he said, Yair Leib, it's my river and I made it, etc., etc. It's a simple thing that you have to keep what you promised. And he didn't keep it this promise. Why? Because he didn't have the bittul to the Eibishter. Which means it's teaching us that in order to do the mitzvahs properly, even the mitzvahs that make sense, you only will keep it if you do it because the Eibishter said. And here we see that there are two things he did bad. He didn't keep his promise to help the Eden, and he didn't have the bittul to Hashem. They're connected. Why did he not keep his promise? Because he didn't have the bittul to Hashem. Und die Nekude is in der Haftarah is meina parshe. Even and also this point in the Haftarah is a subject of the parsha. Und sie bringt Aruis mehr Begillah the minyan parsha. Not only that, it brings out more in a revealed way what the parsha says. How is it? We see that in the parsha. But the Eser Malachas gefindt in Torah zwei Timim. In the Torah, we find two reasons why Hashem brought the Makkahs, the 10 Makkahs, 10 plagues. Number one, Kanal zu Peil sein, the V'yedek Mitzrayim Keni Hashem. One is, like we mentioned before, to cause Mitzrayim to recognize Hashem. And the second thing is, V'yeshtet in Pashalech, and says in Pashalech Lecho, they by the Brizman Absorim told Avram, your children, your descendants are going to be slaves, etc., etc. And then it said, V'games Hageya she'avei yedon anechi. And the nation that will punish, that will hurt them, that will make them work, I will punish. The Makkahs was a punishment for what they did, for what they made the Yidden work hard. Now, there seem like two separate reasons. One is that Mitzrayim should know that the Eibishter is the one, that's why he brought Makkah, the Eibishter is the ruler. And the second thing is to punish him for what they did. Lernt man Arus von der Haftarah, so the Haftarah teaches us, at the zwei times in the Torah said that these two reasons depend on each other. Das ist Pare hat man nicht gewähnt, die Metzies von Eibishter. This is a Pare denied the existence of Hashem. Wer hat geteinet, lo yedaiti es Hashem, as he said, I don't know Hashem, is gewähnt die Sibbe. That was the cause, was hat ihm der 14 Mashabbe seine Peinigung an Yidden werfen nach Chigarua. That brought him that he should make the Yidden suffer so much, so bad. It doesn't have a place even naturally. Naturally, from natural instincts of a human being, this wouldn't happen. So l'chure, even if it would not for Hashem's words, he should have kept it. He should have kept it as a natural human being. A human being doesn't do it. So here we see that what made him work hard, not keep this natural instinct that the person wouldn't do, because he wasn't bottled to Hashem. Because even those things you have to do because you're bottled to Hashem. So we see in the Haftarah Pshat in the Parsha. The Parsha says the two reasons for the Makkahs, and the Haftarah tells us that the two reasons go together. That just like in the Haftarah, that he didn't keep his promise because he didn't have bittul to Hashem. Teach tells us that same thing. That why did Parei make the Yidden work hard? Because he didn't have bittul to Hashem. Or der Inyan as mitzvahs darf man mekayim sein, weil sie seien Zivurim vom Eibishten. This idea that mitzvahs have to be kept because they are commandments of Hashem brings zu noch a maskone, brings us to another conclusion. As a ma'aser ho'iker. Then the main thing is the action of the fact that we say that you have to do even simple mitzvahs, you have to do because Hashem said so. That, if you think deeper, the Rebbe will explain, comes to a conclusion that the action is the most important part. And the Rebbe explains like this. And that's what happened by Matan Torah. The Kima mitzvah shel Oves for Matan Torah, when the Oves did the mitzvahs for Matan Torah, is in Yoneh an Aveide Bekecha Nevroim. They weren't commanded to do it. So they didn't have the power, the strength of Hashem, which is beyond limitation. They did it on their own. They knew the mitzvahs. They weren't told to do it. So they did as much. It's because of the power of them as creation, as part of the creation. The Ad L'Shorsham, they reached a very high level till the root of it, which is Sheirish HaNivroim, which is the root of creation, which is a Lakus, was is Melubish Bebriya B'Seter Shalshalas. So they connected themselves to Hashem. Yeah, every mitzvah connects to Hashem, but they connected to Hashem only the way Hashem already brings them down, close themselves into the creation, or we call it considered in the Seder Ishtalshalis. And when it comes to Seder Ishtalshalis, Kol Eilam B'fnei Atzmi, every world has its own level and its own inyan what it is. So Gashmias and Ruchnias, the Nakuda of what Gashmias and the Nakuda of what Ruchnias is, each thing is a thing for itself. You don't mix the two together. So when you have Ruchnias is not Gashmias. So when you get involved in you reach higher levels, and your higher levels Ruchnias, that doesn't have much to do with the Gashmias. Therefore, the Rebbe says, Yeder mitzvah shebe'etzem yoner lakus v'ruchnis. So therefore, if ruchnis and gashmis are separate, and the mitzvahs reach to a special ruchnisdike way, but not coming from the Eibishter who's beyond Ruchnis and Gashmis, but still say the Ishtalshalis. So every mitzvah which is running Ruchnis has a special content. Was bringt sich ve'ilui in Ruchnis. Every mitzvah accomplishes something in Ruchnis. It brings a certain purification, a certain elevation, etc., etc. And it's in the Ruchnis part of the creation. Sai Shabelam, the Ruchnis is the part of the world. In the Ruchnis is the kinyanim of the world. Also in the Seichel v'Regesh Hodam. In the Ruchnis is the part of the person, which is the Seichel of the person, the rationale, the logic, and the feelings of the person. And that's what the Ovis did. They connected themselves not to the Darge, higher than the Shtalshalis. So there, everything has its own limitations. Ruchnis is Ruchnis, Gashmis is Gashmis. And the main thing of the mitzvahs was reaching a high Ruchnisdik level, so it had an effect on Ruchnis. And that was the Aveda of the mitzvahs of the Ovis. The Ruchnis Nefesh Odom. In the person, it was in the Ruchnis of the person, which is the Seichel and the Midis. Ba'elom, and then in the Ruchnis of the world, Vatzazain Merkove, till they became a chariot, we call it, which means Bittel, and to which level? To Atzilis, Elam Shekula Ruchnis, to Kula Ruchnis. That means that their Aveda was basically Ruchnis. They were in the level that Ruchnis and Gashmis are separated, and their Aveda was to reach higher levels in Ruchnis, and they're two different levels. And since mitzvahs were done in the level of Ruchni, it affected the Ruchnis in the Welt Ruchnis and their personal Ruchnis. And those was and this that we find even by the Ovis that they had to do mitzvahs, not doing mitzvahs is Gashmis. So we see there was a connection to Gashmis. So the Rebbe says is the Asik and Atofel and Uzdruk from the Minyan Ruchni. It was only secondary. It was an expression of the Minyan Ruchni. They did in Ruchni, so they also brought it out. It should be seen in a Gashmisdik way. But der Fall ist demol die meiste mitzvahs begashmi, sie nicht gewinn as bediuk in alle protein wie der Kiem mitzvahs noch Matan. And that's like why when they did the mitzvahs beruchni, the mitzvahs before Matan Torah, it wasn't in the same gashmisdik details as it was after Matan Torah. In the Order 52 that Rabbi brings, for instance, says in Zohar that the tefillin that Yaakov Avinu laid was not really simple tefillin. The sticks that he put up that were instead of tefillin. So he did sticks, he did a gashmisdik thing, but that was only not the details as they were supposed to be. The details didn't matter. Because the main thing was the Ruchnias. But after Matan Torah, the Kima Mitzvah, the Chabere, then it's not the a person themselves, the people, the creatures, high-level creatures, Abraham, etc., but still not beyond the creation. But here it came from Chabere, and the Keich of the Creator. Which is beyond the difference between Ruchnis and Gashmias. Because by the Eibishter is beyond Ruchnis and beyond Gashmias, so there's no difference. They're both together. You can mix them. And only because of the Eibishter who gave the mitzvah, and the Eibishter is beyond Gashmias, so you could fulfill it, and it's the Gashmias is Negeya. You do the Gashmias because Hashem said so. And said Hashem, yes, could be Gash. If Hashem said Gashmias, it's as important and more important than the Ruchnis, because the main thing is Hashem. It's not what you understand, what you feel, and levels that you reach. It's Hashem. Hashem said Gashmias, that's what you have to do. The mail is the Ikir in them, nit as a Kavanas mitzvah. Therefore, the most important part is not the Kavan of the mitzvah. What's in them is Kolech Vech, the Fum Shuri, in Kavanas, not everyone is the same. Nor Asiyas mitzvah pale. The main thing is doing the mitzvah. But those Shabdam Tzavse V'chibit Mitzvah mitzvahs. Doing the mitzvah, that brings the connection to the Eibishter who gave you the mitzvah. And here everyone is equal. In the actual act of the mitzvah, everyone is equal. So the actual doing of the mitzvah is very, very important because that's what the Eibishter wants. But if it's not given because the Eibishter said not connected directly with the Eibishter, then it depends what it is. If it's a Ruchnis Dikinyan, the main thing is Ruchnis. Noch mehr, goes even further. The Rotzen Atzmi mitzvahs is on Helam Ulavush the Dvorim Gash mitzvahs matzvahs. This Rotzen Atzmi, the essential will of Hashem that we find in mitzvahs, doesn't have the concealment and the garment of Dvorim Gashmim b'Maisa mitzvahs. That when you do a Maisa mitzvah, you do it b'Gashmias. If something is a kele for something, so then it could be it's begilui, it's not begilui. The kele fits for it more, the kele fits for it less. But something which is beyond completely, there's no such thing as saying that the kele blocks it. When you need a kele for something, then, and this is the kele, so sometimes the kele could block out. You look at the kele, you look at outside, you don't see what's really there inside. But the kele is not what counts here. The kele is what the Eibishter wants. And therefore, it's not begeder levush v'kele. It's not even called a kele to the mitzvah. This is the mitzvah. Ruchnisdike things to doing something to accomplish a ruchnis. And you do it to the ruchnisdike way. Oh, ruchnis is a fit kele for what you're putting into the kele. So there, ken izay nicht stehen der rotzen atzmin del meile, begolui, was is hecher von kele begeder and nivroim. So when you do a mitzvah beruchnis, only beruchnis in time of the office, so there you couldn't have in it the essential will of Hashem, which is beyond anything else. Why? Because we're trying to bring something down that's from the Eibusher beyond any kele. But if it needs a kele, the kele is the ruchnius, so then you don't have the etzem. The etzem is not something that is dependent on the kele. But when you do mitzvahs, begashmi is after the Eibusher gave, and that's the rotzen of the Eibusher. The fact that it's gashmis doesn't matter. Not only it doesn't matter, it doesn't block out from the true air, because that's what the Eibusher wants. You have it even more. There you see, that doesn't go into the details, in the gashmis, the part of the mitzvah, there you see that this comes from such a high madrege beyond the limitations. And all that happened by Matan Torah. Ab dieser wird werden verständigt, der Scheich ist betechen von der Nevuah wegen der Nebuchadnezzars Schar mit der ersten Nevuah in der Haftarah wegen Mapolis Mitzrayim. This will explain the connection between the Nevuah that Nebuchadnezzar will get reward, the connection of that to the fact, to the beginning of the first part of the Haftarah, that Mitzrayim will have a Mapolim, Mitzrayim will have a downfall. What's the connection? The question, what's the connection? The Rebbe says like this: in the Nevuah was read wegen dem Tashlum Schar zu Nebuchadnezzar for Leiches ein Zur, in that part of Nevuah which talks about the payment, the reward Nebuchadnezzar will get for conquering Zur, is the Chura nicht verstandig. But how we have to understand, why would he get reward? And the Rebbe explains why he shouldn't. Bei einem mit Zur ist Nebuchadnezzar nicht gibt mehr Nuisen zum Akayim zu den Weibischen Zrotzen. By him conquering Zur, it wasn't his intentions because he wanted to do what Eibishter wanted. At Zur soll nicht werden that Eibishter wanted that Sur should be conquered. He did what Eibishter wanted. He did it because Eibishter wanted. That wasn't his reason. He did it because of himself. He wanted to conquer the whole world. Then He wanted to become the superpower of the world. And that's why he wanted to conquer Sur. Number one is Bechef Hayam. Chef Yam, it's on the ocean. It's on the edge of the ocean. So I guess you have more access to other places from there. So he wanted this. It was a strategic place. Yashleimer the Rebbe said you could say a second thing. If in Weg of Mitzrayim, it's possible that this is in the middle of the way going to Mitzrayim. That Bovel was going to Mitzrayim. He wanted to. This is the middle of the way, so he wanted to conquer it. It'll make it the easier way for him to go to Mitzrayim. Or maybe it was Mitzrayim. He was afraid it was dangerous for him. If he's going to Mitzrayim, maybe he'll get stuck in Sur. He won't be able to do it. So that's why he wanted to conquer Sur. He wanted to conquer Mitzrayim. So on the way, he wanted to make sure that nothing stands in his way. So he did it for his own personal ego. Why does he get reward? The Posuk answered that. The Posuk says he gets reward for for the act that he did. It's not so important his thoughts and his intentions, nor his actual act. Since Hashem's will happened through him, he did what Hashem wanted. Even if he wouldn't do it, Hashem's will would have happened. Hashem wanted Sur to be destroyed. It would have happened through somebody else. But he was the one that happened to do it. He gets reward for that. So this all fits to what we said before, that the Maise is the Iker. When it comes to Hashem's will, the Maise is the Iker. Even though the Kavanah is not there. And the Kavanah is something that's Ruchnius. But what Eibishter wants is the mitzvah. And that happened by Matan Torah, that the act is what counts. And here we see, this is what it's, and that's part of the Parsha. That you have to do the Maisa mitzvah. That we say, now we're speaking about the Haftarah. But in the Parsha also we see what this whole thing was a bittul for Matan Torah, which bittul means that you have to do the Maisa. That's what one of the things that happened with Matan Torah, that you have to do the Maisa. That's what the Parsha is leading up to. And in the Haftarah we see it clearly. Even though one might ask, but we're talking here about Nebuchadnezzar, the Torah wasn't given to him. So he's not part of the Sinyan that you have to have it in a way of Matan Torah, which is bittul and not because of your yeshes. So that's why the Maise is the Iker, that's what Abisha wants. In order 44 before, the Rebbe writes, that we know that even Goyim have to keep their mitzvahs, because Hashem told us in the Torah, he told us through Moshe Rabbeinu. So even they have to keep it because of Matan Torah. And you look at the Sichas, the Rebbe explains that you could say that if they don't do it because of that reason, they're not doing the mitzvahs properly. So even they have this idea that they have to do it through bittul. And here we and the B'meila, the Maise is the Iker, because we're talking about not doing it for your own. For your own, everything is different. It's your seichel, your midas, so it's not going to a level which is higher beyond gashmis and ruchnis. If you do it because of bittul, then you can reach that higher level, which there the Maise is the Iker, and that we see in the Haftarah. Hashem, here we have a lesson in serving Hashem. When he got a favor from somebody, so Rabbi sich nicht machen am Cheshbon, dass jener hat mir nicht gemeint zu tun mit mir. You might think that the guy didn't mean to do me a favor. The Rabbi got he had his own reasons for it. He has his own pnia why he's doing it, because he gains from it. Or you might say, well, that's his nature. It's not really him. We don't have to thank him for the favor. The guy has to do it. That's his nature. So one might think, if a guy does me a favor, I have to look at the intentions. And I'm not sure his intentions was for me. Then the Haftarah says, Haftarah teaches us, I feel in the Nebuchadrezzar, was it sicher gemein sich, even the Nebuchadnezzar, was definitely, certainly meant himself. But him the Rebbe gave schar the far was he's given pulos asher overbo. Hashem gave him a reward for the act that he did. It's for the action. Lachas kama bakas. That's even by a goy. Lachas kama bakama and itu tapula teva. Certainly, when a yid does a good act, was this mistaverle? Here it even makes more sense as hot iton nit nor in naifen from Polos that by yid you assume he didn't just mean to do the act itself. No zayndik beteva gave chasodim v'rachamonim takech mit herzen. So we assume since a yid be'etzem beteva is dos chesed and has pity and has rachmanas on people, so probably he even meant it. But even if he wouldn't have meant it, but he did me a favor, he gets reward. This adds another reason, a logical reason. If them word from Baal Shem Tov, what the Baal Shem Tov said, we have to love every Yid. I feel that them was gefinzich bekatz v'tevil and ratim came on the somebody's other side of the world, and he never saw him. So we're going to give, based on what we said before, a logical reason for this. Now the real reason is because all the Yidden are like one. It says in Tanya Perek Lamed Beis, are like brothers, and so you have to love every Yid, even if you never saw him. But that's not logic. That's emunah, believing that this is what it is. So the Rebbe says, now I'm giving you a logical reason, a seichel reason. What's the seichel reason? Jeder Yid, was for a matzav is on sein, every Yid, and what kind of situation he is, hot geton, kama bekama maisim tevim, did many, many good things, good maisim. K'mayim HaChazal, the Gemara says, malei mitzvahs kerim, I feel a Pesha Israel, the worst Yid, full of mitzvahs, like a pomegranate is full of seeds. The bald as jeder maisim tevim, I feel machshavat tevim, the wirkung of the ganze Welt. And since any good act, even any good thought, has an influence on the whole world. The Lashon HaRambam, like the Rambam says, that if a person does one act, he could tip the scale for himself and for the whole world to the positive side. The Gorem Leib you could cause everybody, the whole world, a saving, Hashem help, a help and a saving of Hashem. So it comes out as jeder Yid is mekabel tshuva atzola from kol echad min Yisrael. So it comes out that every Yid gains a favor from every other Yid. Since every Yid in the world does a mitzvah, does mitzvahs, any mitzvah he does helps everybody, including myself. So every Yid did me a favor. So we have to love him because he did me a favor. We have to accept it. We have to appreciate it. Und nachher als jener oder dabei nicht getracht werden, der Favor was rausgekommen von dem zweiten. Even though the other person didn't think about the favor he'll cause to somebody else. Certainly not to somebody you never saw on the other side of the world. But deswegen still, since the fact is that we receive the favor from another person, says but it's the pool, it's the act. You have to appreciate it. So much so that you should have a feeling of love to every single Yid, and an eifim from in a way that you should love your friend, your fellow Yid, like yourself.